So we will start. So the first topic in this session will be the clinical features and evaluation of primary congenital glaucoma. So this session is on the surgical management of primary congenital glaucoma. But before that, we have to diagnose the disease entity properly. And particularly, there are some mimics of congenital glaucoma which must be excluded. So it's very important to understand that prompt diagnosis of childhood glaucoma and appropriate treatment can minimize the degree of visual impairment, because this child has to live with this vision for his or her life. And also, we should keep in mind that a child should not be labeled as having glaucoma or subjected to surgical treatment unless one is reasonably sure of the diagnosis and has excluded other conditions that mimic glaucoma. Over this course, we'll find there are several disease entities which can mimic a case of primary congenital glaucoma. Now, childhood glaucoma is IOP related damage to the eye, of course, and the IOP measurement in infants and young children, especially during UA, can potentially be affected by many factors. So whenever we are measuring the IOP, it may not reflect the actual IOP. There are other factors. That is why other signs of glaucoma in this age group, such as ocular enlargement, hub striae, and increased cup disc ratio, and progressive increase in the axial length, they are more important. Now, the classification of the childhood glaucomas by the Collaborative Glaucoma Research Network is into primary childhood glaucomas and the secondary childhood glaucomas. The primary childhood glaucomas include the primary congenital glaucoma, which we'll be discussing today. Apart from that, we have the juvenile open-angle glaucoma in older age, and there can be glaucomas associated with the secondary glaucomas. This can be non-acquired anomalies like Axenfeld-Rieger and Peters, non-acquired systemic disease, example Downs or Sturge-Weber, acquired conditions, for example, uveitis, steroid-induced, or glaucoma following cataract surgery. Now, primary congenital glaucoma out of these is the most common form of developmental glaucoma. The basic pathology is isolated maldevelopment of the trabecular meshwork, also called isolated trabecular dysgenesis, and it is not associated with other developmental ocular anomalies or ocular diseases that raise the IOP. So while we are trying to evaluate a child with congenital glaucoma, what are our aims? First of all is to confirm the diagnosis that it is indeed a case of PCG. Number two, to exclude secondary developmental glaucoma. Number three, to establish the baseline parameters for this child. Number four, to assess the severity and prognosis of the disease. Number five, to assess any ocular and systemic comorbidities. And number six, to rule out any space occupancies that mimic glaucoma. Now, regarding the history, some of the important practical points are: number one, the age of onset of symptoms or signs. The common features, clinical features, are epiphora without discharge, photophobia, blepharospasm, corneal haze or opacification. Rarely it can mimic a red eye. And you should also inquire about some of the pertinent history like rubella during pregnancy, use of forceps, family history, for example, parental consanguinity. This is very important in certain parts of our country, and glaucoma in siblings. Now, what are the primary symptoms of primary congenital glaucoma? Most Western textbooks describe a classical triad of epiphora, photophobia, and blepharospasm. However, in several studies done in India, the primary features are large eyeball size and hazy eyes from corneal edema, because the type of glaucoma we see here is more advanced. Dr. Mandal reported this case series of acute corneal hydrops in children with primary infantile glaucoma, where these children can present with acute hydrops, sudden onset of haziness of the cornea. Now, the visual assessment has to be done and age appropriate methods have to be adopted. So in a small child, we have to check the fixation, whereas with older children, we have to test with the specific optotypes. Then comes the most important thing, that is examination under anesthesia, where we have to find out the refractive status, the corneal findings, the intraocular pressure, gonioscopy, ophthalmoscopy, and more importantly, decision of surgery. In many cases, UA and surgery are planned together. Now, what are the requisites for UA? A pediatric speculum is needed, then ringer lactate or normal saline or BSS, calipers to measure the corneal diameter, appropriate tonometer, ophthalmoscope, retinoscope, gonio lens, and B scan and pachymetry. Now, regarding the choice of the anesthetic agent, the type of anesthesia and the type of tonometer are important. In general, all anesthetics and sedative agents lower the intraocular pressure, excepting ketamine, chloral hydrate, and benzodiazepines. Sevoflurane is the most commonly used inhaled agent due to its convenience and safety profile. And the IOP, importantly, should be recorded the moment the child stops moving after inhaled anesthesia and prior to intubation, because intubation will cause a false rise in the intraocular pressure. And the normal IOP in an infant is slightly lower than in an adult, but on an average, 10 to 21 millimeter of mercury is the standard. Now, the intraocular pressure can be assessed by various equipments. So Goldman applanation tonometer and Parkins are the gold standard. So while in UA, we commonly use the Parkins tonometer. The other alternatives are the Tonopen, and the eye care tonometer is now recently used in many centers. It is a portable rebound tonometer, which does not need topical anesthesia. And very importantly, as soon as possible, the IOP should be checked after the initiation of the inhalation anesthesia and prior to intubation. Sorry, the slide is. Hmm. Right. So the corneal haze is representative of the severity. Usually it is more in center, and we have to check the pupillary margin, the iris details, and the fundus details to assess the extent of the corneal edema. Initially, the corneal edema is simple epithelial edema, and subsequently, when the IOP rises, it can cause permanent stromal edema and even corneal scarring. The corneal diameter has to be assessed. So the horizontal visible corneal diameter is measured with the caliper. The normal finding is it is about 9.5 to 10.5 millimeter at birth, and if it is more than 11 millimeter in the newborn child, more than 12 millimeter in a child 1 year of age, or more than 13 millimeter at any age, then it is highly suspicious. The corneal striae has to be carefully looked at. The hub striae are usually concentric to limbus in the periphery, and in the center they are more typically horizontal, and this has to be differentiated from the hub striae that striae that can arise because of forceps injury. So they are usually vertical, unilateral, and central. Now, regarding the fundus is evaluated by the binocular indirect ophthalmoscopy. A cup disc ratio more than 0.3 in an infant or more than 0.5 in an older child is suspicious. We should also look carefully at the retina. The pachymetry can influence the accuracy of the Goldman applanation tonometer. However, CGRN recommends that the CCT should not be used to adjust an IOP measurement, but it should rather be taken into consideration in the overall context of this child. Axial length is very important. Absolute value may not be important, and it usually decreases after surgery. But if the axial length is progressively increasing, even after surgery, then we might suspect that the glaucoma is indeed progressing. B scan is important because if the cornea is hazy, we have to evaluate the posterior segment. There can be evidence of optic nerve cupping, and very important to rule out space occupying lesions like retinoblastoma. Gonioscopy may be difficult prior to surgery. It should be performed whenever the view allows us. So it can be done by the gonioscope, like the Cope lens. And what are the characteristic findings in primary congenital glaucoma? In the normal newborn eye, the iris has recessed beyond the scleral spur, so the scleral spur is visible as a whitish band. Whereas in contrast, in primary congenital glaucoma, the peripheral iris inserts to the trabecular meshwork and the scleral spur is not visualized. Then, the confirmation of these findings is done during the UA. So we have to confirm PCG by the corneal edema, hub striae, and the corneal diameter, increase in the intraocular pressure, exclude glaucoma other than primary congenital glaucoma, and exclude non-glaucomatous conditions mimicking glaucoma. Yeah, thank you. So that is the end of this presentation.